The sun was sinking low behind the thorny hills, bleeding red light across the African sky. In the village square, shadows grew longer, carrying with them whispers that cut deeper than any blade. Women huddled together, their voices hushed, their eyes darting toward the small hut at the edge of the square. Children clung to their mothers' wrappers wide-eyed, while the men sat in uneasy silence. The air itself felt heavy, like it carried a verdict waiting to be spoken. At the center of those whispers was a girl of only 20 years. Her name trembled on their tongues as if it carried misfortune. They said she was cursed, that her shadow had darkened their harvests, that her glance had withered their goats. Misfortune, illness, and sudden deaths, all laid at her feet, though she had no power but her youth and her quiet strength. Her stepmother stood tall among them, eyes hard as stone, her voice sharp enough to slice through doubt. "The girl is poison," she declared, her hands lifted as if swearing to the spirits themselves. "Since her mother died, she has walked with shadows. You all know it. When children cough, when rain refuses to fall, it is her presence that taints the air." The elders shifted uneasily under the ancient baobab tree. They were men who had lived long enough to fear anything they could not explain. And fear had settled in their bones like disease. The stepmother pressed on, her voice rising, her bitterness spilling like bile. "Send her away. Send her where the spirits live. Let the forest claim what belongs to it. If she is innocent, the forest will return her. If she is guilty, then let her rot among the roots." No one opposed her. No one dared. It was easier to believe the lie than question it. It was easier to sacrifice one than admit their own helplessness. And so it was decided. At dusk, when the sky burned like firewood, the young woman was dragged from her hut. She did not scream, though her eyes glistened with unshed tears. Her wrists were bound with rough rope, and a cloth was tied around her eyes so she would not see the path back. Villagers followed in silence, a procession of cowards hiding their guilt behind superstition. Her feet stumbled over stones and roots, her breath trembling with each step. She could hear the murmur of drums from the village fading behind her, each beat like a nail sealing her fate. The earth smelled damp, heavy with the promise of night. She whispered beneath her breath, a plea to ancestors she had never seen but always believed in. "Do not abandon me." At last they reached the edge of the forest, a wall of towering trees, their branches woven tight as if they wished to bar her from entering. The villagers did not step past the threshold. They pushed her forward, and when she fell to her knees, the stepmother leaned close, her breath hot with cruelty. "Do not look for your way back," she hissed. "The forest does not return what it swallows." With that, the ropes were cut from her wrists, but the blindfold remained. They turned and left, their footsteps crunching quickly on the dry leaves as though afraid to linger. She knelt there, alone, the darkness thickening around her. Her breath came ragged, and the silence pressed in until it felt alive. Somewhere deep in the forest, an owl cried, its voice carrying like a warning. When at last she pulled away the cloth from her eyes, she found herself staring into the endless black of the forest. No path. No lantern. No sound but her heartbeat. The village was gone. The world she had known was gone. And only the forest remained. She stepped forward, hesitant, as if each footfall might wake something ancient beneath the soil. The ropes had rubbed her wrists raw, and her legs trembled from the long walk, yet the deeper terror came not from pain but from the silence that wrapped itself around her like a burial shroud. The forest did not breathe like the open fields of the village. It held its air close, secretive, suffocating. Tall trees loomed above her, their trunks dark pillars that seemed to stretch forever into the fading light. Their branches knotted together into a canopy so thick that even the stars struggled to pierce through. She turned once, looking back. For a heartbeat, she thought she saw the glow of firelight, her village, her home, but then it was gone, swallowed by shadow. Only the faint echo of drums lingered in the distance, dull and hollow, as though mocking her with the sound of life she no longer belonged to. Her bare feet pressed against the forest floor, cold earth mixed with tangled roots. She stumbled forward, whispering her own name softly, as though reminding herself that she was still human, still alive, not yet the spirit they claimed her to be. But her voice fell flat. No bird stirred, no insect buzzed, no leaf trembled. It was not merely quiet. It was silence sharpened into a blade. The girl's heart raced faster. She called out once, her voice cracking, "Is anyone here?" The words seemed to vanish before they reached the trees as if swallowed whole. There was no answer, not even an echo. She tried again, louder, her throat tightening with desperation. "Please, is someone there?" Still nothing. Tears stung her eyes, but she blinked them away, unwilling to let fear blind her. She kept walking, though the forest gave her no direction. Every tree looked the same. Every shadow whispered the same lie, that she was trapped. The villagers had left her no food, no water, no torch. They had sent her here to vanish, and part of her feared she already had. The longer she walked, the more the air grew thick, damp, and heavy. It clung to her skin, seeped into her lungs, until breathing itself felt like wading through water. Yet in that suffocating stillness she felt something else. Watching. Every hair on her neck prickled. She paused, her body stiffening, her ears straining for the slightest sound. None came. But the weight of unseen gazes pressed against her. She turned sharply, but behind her was only endless trees, lined up like silent sentinels. Still she could not shake the feeling that if she blinked too long they might move. Her steps faltered and she dropped to her knees, clutching at the damp earth. She whispered a prayer her mother had once taught her, a plea to the ancestors who lived beyond storms and rivers. Her voice cracked, but she forced the words out, each one trembling in the still air. "Guide me, don't let me vanish here." The forest gave no reply. But faintly, so faintly she almost thought she imagined it, she heard the last drumbeat from the village, a hollow, final thud carried on the wind. It was not comfort. It was a farewell. Her chest tightened. Alone. Forgotten. And yet, not quite. For as she rose unsteadily to her feet, the silence shifted. It was subtle, like the pause between breaths, but she felt it. The air changed, heavy with something that did not belong to her. Something that belonged to the forest. It was waiting. She pressed forward, deeper into the trees, her fear and stubborn will carrying her step after step into the endless dark. Night crept in slowly, the forest folding itself into a darker shape around her. The girl walked until her legs ached, then collapsed against the trunk of a tree, pulling her knees to her chest. The silence had not broken, not with bird call, not with insects, and that absence pressed on her like a weight. But when the wind shifted she heard it. A branch snapped in the distance, sharp and deliberate. Her head jerked up, eyes darting into the darkness. Nothing moved, yet her heart pounded as if chased. Then came another sound. Not the snapping of wood this time, but softer, a murmur faint as breath. At first she thought it was her mind playing tricks, weaving words out of the sigh of the leaves. But the whisper returned, curling around her name like smoke. Amina. Her blood froze. She had not heard her name since the villagers dragged her away. She scrambled to her feet, pressing her back to the tree. "Who's there?" she called, her voice trembling. The forest did not answer. But the whispers grew. Not one voice, but many, low and indistinct, like a gathering just beyond her sight. They overlapped, some mournful, some angry, some almost coaxing. She could not make out their words, yet she knew, deep in her bones, that they were speaking to her. Her breath came shallow, her ears straining. "Leave me," she pleaded. "I am no spirit. I am only a girl." The voices hushed. For a moment the forest fell still again and relief washed through her like water. But then a single whisper slithered close, so near it felt as though lips brushed her ear. "We see you," she cried out, spinning around, but no one was there. Only the trees, tall and unmoving, their bark darkened by shadow. Her legs shook. She tried to run, branches clawing at her arms, roots snagging her feet. Every few steps the whispers returned, chasing her through the dark. They were not angry shouts, nor kind reassurances, only endless murmurs, layered like water running over stone. The deeper she ran, the stranger the forest became. Trees seemed to shift when she wasn't looking, bending subtly toward her, as though leaning in to listen. Shadows swayed where no wind blew. And the animals, there were none. Not a bird, not a fox, not a single rustle of life. She realized with horror that they were avoiding her path, as if the forest itself had warned them of what followed her. Exhaustion finally dragged her down. She stumbled into a small clearing, collapsing onto the earth. Her chest heaved, sweat mixing with dirt across her skin. The whispers surrounded her now, not distant, not faint, but circling, rising like a crowd pressing close. She covered her ears, rocking back and forth. "Stop, stop please," she begged. But the whispers only shifted, weaving into a rhythm. They repeated her name, sometimes soft, sometimes harsh like an incantation. "Mina, Mina, Mina." Her tears fell fast. She remembered the stepmother's words, "Let the spirits claim her." Was this what they meant? That the forest would not kill her outright, but peel her slowly apart with madness? Then silence. She opened her eyes. The clearing was still, moonlight breaking through the canopy for the first time. And there at the far edge a shape lingered. Too tall to be a villager. Too still to be an animal. Her breath caught. The figure did not move. But the whispers had stopped the moment it appeared, as though bowing to its presence. She rubbed her eyes, praying it was an illusion born of fear. When she looked again, it was gone. The silence that followed was not comfort. It was a promise. She curled onto the earth, trembling, too afraid to move again. The forest had spoken, and she knew now she was not merely lost. She was being watched. Darkness claimed the forest completely, and with it came a fear that gnawed at her bones. The faint moonlight she had relied upon vanished behind heavy clouds, leaving the world black. Amina's hands fumbled as she gathered twigs, her breath trembling with every snap of dry wood. Her mother had once taught her how to spark fire with stone and patience. Now, with shaking fingers, she tried to remember. At last a spark caught. A fragile flame bloomed, and she shielded it as though it were her own beating heart. The fire grew, small but steady, pushing the shadows back only a little. The trees stood at the edges, their shapes stretching upward like sentinels. She sat close to the warmth, drawing her knees into her chest, listening to the forest breathe. But the whispers returned. Not from the trees this time, nor from the earth. They came from the fire. She leaned closer, her eyes wide. For a moment, the flames twisted, and within them she thought she saw shapes, faces forming in the smoke and flicker. One face had her mother's eyes, soft and kind, and for a heartbeat she dared to believe. "Mother?" she whispered. The face wavered, then stretched, distorting into something hollow-eyed and grinning. She screamed, throwing herself back, the firelight quivering with her panic. The flames crackled louder, as if mocking her, as if speaking in tongues she could not understand. Her chest heaved. "It's only the fire," she told herself. "Only tricks of light." But the fear would not leave. Above her, branches rattled though the air was still. Something heavy shifted in the trees, unseen. She felt the weight of countless eyes pressing on her, watching from every direction. The silence of animals confirmed it. No bird dared to call, no insect dared to sing. The forest itself held its breath. She clutched her arms around herself, rocking gently. "I will not die here," she whispered, though her voice was barely more than a plea. The fire hissed, sending sparks into the dark. And in the crackle of those sparks she heard it again, her name, low and deliberate. "Mina." She froze. Her eyes darted around the clearing. Nothing moved, yet the voice was closer than before, threaded into the flames. Her body quaked. She pressed her forehead to the dirt, praying to her ancestors. "Watch me. Do not let me be taken by shadows. Carry me to dawn." The wind stirred suddenly, sweeping through the trees, fanning her small fire into a brighter blaze. She gasped at the burst of light, and in that moment saw them. Figures. Dozens of them, faint like smoke given shape. Standing between the trees, their faces pale and blurred, their eyes faintly glowing. Watching her. Silent. Her scream caught in her throat, strangled by terror. She curled tighter, covering her eyes, refusing to look again. The fire sputtered, then steadied. When she dared lift her head, the figures were gone. Only the trees remained, tall and still, their shadows long. But she could not sleep. She dared not close her eyes. All night she sat by the fire, trembling, listening to the wind carry whispers she tried not to understand. And as the sky began to pale with dawn, one truth had taken root deep inside her. She was not alone in the forest. She had never been alone. Morning light filtered weakly through the canopy, a dim and green-tinted glow. Amina woke with her back stiff, her body trembling from the cold. Her small fire had died in the night, leaving only faint smoke spiraling upward. For a moment, despair pressed down on her like a heavy stone. She had no food, no water, and no hope of finding her way out. Then she saw it. Beneath her bare feet, the soil seemed to glow faintly. Thin, pale roots ran across the earth like veins of light. They pulsed softly as though alive, and stretched forward into the deeper trees. Amina blinked, rubbed her eyes, but the glow did not fade. She hesitated, whispering a prayer to her ancestors, before placing one cautious step onto the path of roots. The forest responded. A faint rustle stirred above her, branches creaking as though shifting in unseen hands. The path wound gently forward, and though she tried to look away, her eyes always returned to its glow. Each step she took seemed to settle something inside her, as if the forest itself guided her. But when she glanced back, her heart jolted. The trail she had walked was gone. Behind her, there was nothing but endless trees, thick and unmoving. It was as if the forest had swallowed her footprints whole. Panic threatened to rise, but then she noticed something else. when she turned her gaze forward again, the trees ahead had subtly shifted. Where moments before there had been a wall of bark and roots, now there was space, a passage opening like the slow breath of a living thing. She gasped. The forest was not a prison. It was moving for her. Hours passed, though time felt strange here. Sometimes the path curved into shadow, sometimes into sunlight that broke through in sudden shafts. She heard faint whispers, voices too soft to understand, carried by the wind between the trunks. She could not tell if they were real or only her tired mind breaking apart. Once, she thought she saw a figure in the distance, standing among the trees, tall, still watching. But when she blinked, the space was empty, the roots only leading further on. Her fear wavered between terror and awe. She no longer knew if she was walking deeper into danger or being carried toward some secret truth. But one thing was certain, the forest had chosen her. And whatever waited at the end of the path, she could not turn back. The glowing roots guided her deeper until even the air felt different, heavy, damp, and humming with unseen power. The trees grew taller here, their trunks impossibly wide, their branches tangled together like fingers holding secrets. Amina's breath came quick, her legs trembling from exhaustion, but she pressed on. The whispers in the wind grew clearer now, threading into words that almost made sense. Not lost, not alone. Her heart pounded. She turned sharply, certain someone had spoken behind her, but saw only shifting leaves. Then she stepped into a clearing. The space was circular, carved naturally as though the forest had held it open for centuries. In the center stood a figure. He was tall, impossibly so, draped in a dark cloak woven from something that shimmered like bark and shadow. His skin glowed faintly, pale as moonlight, and where his eyes should have been, two small orbs flickered like fireflies in the night. He did not move when she entered. Amina froze at the edge of the clearing, her throat dry. Who are you?" she whispered. The figure tilted his head slightly, his voice low but carrying through the stillness of the forest. "You are not the first they have thrown away." Her stomach twisted. "Then, what do you want from me?" He took one slow step forward, and though his movement was measured, the earth itself seemed to shift with him. The roots beneath Amina's feet pulsed brighter, as if answering his presence. "I want nothing," he said. "It is the forest that wants. And I have been waiting." The words curled around her like smoke, both terrifying and strangely comforting. "Waiting? For me?" His firefly eyes glowed brighter. "Yes. For one marked by cruelty, left to die, yet unwilling to break. The forest does not end lives, child. It remakes them." Amina's breath caught. Her heart screamed to flee, but her body would not move. Somehow, deep inside, she felt the truth in his words. This was no trick of her mind. The forest had led her here for a reason. The figure extended one hand, long fingers pale and strong. "Come," he said softly. "The night of your rebirth begins." And though fear wrapped around her ribs like iron bands, something deeper, something older, pulled her toward him. The clearing felt alive, every leaf listening, every root breathing. The figure did not rush to speak again. Instead, he studied Amina as though her very presence answered questions older than the village itself. Finally he lowered his hood. His face was not monstrous, it was almost human. His skin held the pale glow of moonlit water, and faint markings like vines wound across his cheeks and brow. His eyes, however, still flickered like fireflies, shifting between warmth and warning. Amina's lips trembled. You are not a spirit." He inclined his head slowly. "Not anymore. Once I was a man of a village not unlike yours. I was betrayed, cast into this forest with ropes around my wrists, just as you were sent with ashes on your soul." Her breath caught. His voice carried the weight of grief buried deep but never forgotten. "They thought the forest would devour me," he continued. "But the forest does not devour. Remembers? It claimed me, reshaped me, and bound me to its roots. Since that night I have waited. For me," she whispered, uncertain whether to feel chosen or cursed. "For someone like you," he said. "The abandoned, the scorned, the broken. The forest does not want their powerful warriors or their proud leaders. It wants those the world tried to erase, for only they can understand what it means to endure." Amina's knees weakened, but she stood tall. "Why me? Why now?" His glowing eyes dimmed for a moment, softening. "Because the forest is stirring. Because cruelty has stretched too far, and blood too often stains the soil. You have been marked by pain, but you carry within you a strength greater than you know. The forest saw it. I saw it. That is why you found the path." A shiver raced across her skin. She remembered the roots glowing under her steps, the way the trees bent to form a trail. She hadn't been stumbling blindly, she had been led. The forest does not end lives, he said again, each word heavy as thunder. It remakes them. Just as it remade me, it is ready to remake you. Amina stared at him, heart pounding. She should have felt terror, but instead, for the first time since her exile, she felt seen. Not as a curse. Not as a scapegoat. But as something more. The forest grew unbearably quiet after his words, as though every living thing held its breath. Even the air thickened, heavy with the scent of damp earth and unseen blossoms. Amina's pulse raced in her ears. The guardian's gaze never wavered. I offer you two paths, he said, his voice neither coaxing nor commanding, but carrying the gravity of something eternal. You may return to your village carrying the forest's wrath. They will know what they have cast away, and their nights will never again be free of shadow. Or you may remain here within the roots and whispers and be bound to me. Together we will guard this place until the world forgets its cruelty. Amina's lips parted but no sound emerged. She looked at her blistered hands, at the faint scars of humiliation still etched into her flesh from the stepmother's cruelty. She remembered the ashes smeared on her, the whispers, the laughter. She had been erased before her own eyes. The thought of returning to the village with power burned inside her. She could walk back through the forest paths, her stepmother trembling, the elders bowing in shame. Lightning could answer her commands. The same mouths that called her cursed would beg her forgiveness. She had dreamed of such a moment. Every night she wept in silence, she had prayed for it. And yet, another thought stirred. The forest felt alive around her, not cruel but patient. It had held her when no one else had, guided her when she had no path. To stay meant freedom from the chains of human spite. To stay meant never again needing to prove she belonged. But it also meant leaving behind the girl she had been, surrendering her flesh and years to something eternal. The guardian's eyes glowed faintly, watching her turmoil without judgment. Power will not heal you, he said gently. Neither will escape. Only choice will. Amina's throat tightened. If I return, she whispered, I become their fear. If I stay, I become yours. He stepped closer, shadows bending around him, his form flickering between man and spirit. Not mine. The forest. I am not its master, I am its servant. And so would you be. But together we would be something they cannot erase. Her chest rose and fell rapidly. She turned her head and saw the faint trail of roots that had led her here still glowing behind her, beckoning back toward the village. Beyond them lay the square, the jeering faces, the stepmother's venom. Her hands clenched. The forest seemed to lean closer, branches arching like arms waiting to cradle her. The hum beneath the soil throbbed in her bones, steady, alive. Her choice weighed like thunder on the horizon. When dawn bled pale over the treetops, the village stirred with the usual murmurs of firewood cracking and goats bleating. Yet that morning felt wrong. The air was thicker, colder, as though the forest itself leaned too close. Villagers noticed it but none spoke aloud. Their silence broke only when a single figure emerged from the mist of trees. Mina. She walked slowly, her steps sure and unhurried. Her dress, once tattered, now clung to her as though stitched by unseen hands, its edges dusted with glowing spores from the forest floor. Her hair, tangled from nights of exile, seemed to move with a wind no one else could feel. But it was her eyes that froze the villagers in place, no longer the frightened gaze of a banished girl, but dark pools reflecting green fire, as if the trees themselves peered through her. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some dropped their baskets, others stepped back, clutching children close. A man whispered hoarsely, "She lives," another replied, "No. She walks with the one who waits." Behind her, the forest swayed unnaturally. The trees bent forward, their branches clawing low, as though the entire woodland had crept closer in her wake. Birds did not sing. Instead, an eerie hum, the sound of roots stretching under soil, trembled beneath their feet. Amina said nothing. Her silence carried heavier than any scream. She only lifted her head and let her gaze sweep across them. The elders, who had nodded in approval when her stepmother demanded exile, faltered under her stare. One looked away muttering prayers. Another clutched his chest as if his own heart betrayed him. Children peeked from behind their mother's skirts, wide-eyed, whispering, "Is she a ghost?" But she was no ghost. She was more. The stepmother, pale as ash, pushed through the crowd. Her lips trembled, but pride held her voice steady, at least for the moment. "You should not have returned," she hissed. "The forest should have swallowed you." Amina tilted her head, slow and deliberate, as if listening to words carried from far away. Then she whispered, so softly that only those nearest heard, "The forest remembers." The wind rose sharply, rattling the huts, snapping a clay pot against the ground. Leaves swirled across the square though no storm had formed. A few villagers fell to their knees in terror, bowing their heads. Others fled to the edges of the square, murmuring of curses and spirits. And still she walked forward, her shadow stretching long, fused with the trees that loomed behind her. The village had cast her away. But now she had returned not as their victim but as their reckoning. That night the village did not sleep. Fires burned in every hut, but no warmth reached the hearts of those who huddled inside. The whispers of what they had seen, the girl alive, her eyes like the forest's fire, spread like fever. Some swore they saw branches pressing against their windows though no storm blew. Others claimed the ground beneath their mats pulsed like a heartbeat. In the largest hut, the stepmother sat trembling though she tried to hide it. She sat upright, her hands clenched, muttering to herself, "She is no more than a cursed girl. Flesh and blood. She cannot frighten me." But her voice shook and every crackle of firewood made her flinch. Then came the rustle. Not outside, inside. A faint dragging sound like vines slithering across the floor. Her eyes darted to the corners of the hut. Nothing. Only shadows. She stood quickly, clutching a wooden spoon as if it were a weapon. "Who's there?" she demanded, though her throat felt dry. No reply, only a sudden creak as though the walls themselves bent. Her breath quickened. She turned toward the mat where she slept and froze. Ash and leaves were scattered across it, though she had swept the hut clean before dusk. Her knees weakened. She knew. The air grew damp and heavy. The flames in her hearth guttered, then surged, showing her what she feared most, a pale face flickering in the firelight. The face of Amina, eyes dark and unblinking, watching her from the wavering glow. The lips did not move, yet the hut filled with a whisper, "The forest remembers." The stepmother staggered back, hitting the wall, heart pounding against her ribs. "No, no, this is trickery," she shouted, voice breaking. "You are not real." But the ground beneath her answered, rumbling softly. From the cracks in the dirt floor, thin vines emerged, creeping slowly, patiently, like snakes savoring their prey. She scrambled to her bed, pulling her blanket over her legs, trying to lift them from the floor, but the vines climbed higher, brushing her ankles, curling cold and damp around her skin. She screamed. Her neighbors heard the cry, but none dared to come. They pressed their ears to their walls, whispering prayers, pretending not to hear the sound of something dragging, tightening, pulling. Inside, the stepmother fought wildly, tearing at the vines, but more sprouted, each thicker than the last. They coiled around her arms, her waist, her throat. The firelight flickered again, and this time Amina's figure stood clear in the flames, her outline steady against the crackling wood. "You cast me to the trees," the voice whispered, echoing from no mouth. "Now the trees claim you." The vines surged, wrapping her tighter, dragging her from her bed. Her nails clawed at the earth, leaving deep grooves as she was pulled toward the doorway. She shrieked for mercy, but the only reply was the groan of bending wood as the hut seemed to open its own threshold. Villagers who dared peek through their windows saw a horror they would never forget. The stepmother, screaming, dragged into the night by vines that moved as though alive. Her hands grasped the frame of her doorway, but the wood splintered beneath her grip. Then she was gone, swallowed by the forest beyond the huts. The cries faded into silence. Only the wind remained, whispering through the trees, carrying the last word she had heard, "The forest remembers." By dawn, her hut was empty, her bed cold, her footprints gone. All that remained was a trail of broken vines stretching into the forest, and no one dared follow.